Is the question you are speaking about diminishing big businesses?
Yeah.
And I think when you said that, I got so scared because I think we have some level of comfort in knowing that there's these big businesses. How do we, is that something that's scary, or does that actually come with opportunities? In the media space, Pat is speaking about he's the middle guy, not too big, not too small, agile enough to respond.
Yes, I think it's an evolution, right? It's we have a cyclical economy. There is sometimes a place for big business and sometimes a place for small business. We are in Africa, and if you take our youth population, that youth is not going to create the next big business in the next 20 years. That's the youth that's going to put the first building blocks to creating perhaps for the next generation to take it to the next level. So what we need to embrace, and I think there's something that in fact troubles me the most, when you say you are an SME in Africa, it's almost like you are the stepchild. Whereas that's actually the powerhouse. That's where the power sits. That's the biggest tax base. That's the biggest employer in South Africa, and it applies equally in Africa. So it shouldn't be something that scares us. It's something that we should embrace because it creates employment. But here's why it's more attractive to me, is because it's actually a positive thing that somebody could sit in their room and broadcast content and call themselves an influencer, right? Because influencer right now is not a positive word in every scenario, but you can influence pretty much anything. It doesn't have to be the negative content. And once that starts to be commercialized, where you are influencing things that are commercial in nature, things that attract advertisers, that speaks to brands, then suddenly you'll see that the influencer, and SARS is correct, they correctly identified the opportunity, because cumulatively the influencers, and I haven't researched this, but cumulatively they probably surpass a lot of what we would have called mainstream radio when you aggregate all the income that they make. So what we need to do is we need to do more of what we're doing, which is more of owning those small pockets of performance at the rate of influencers, at the rate of agencies. When you even look at most companies, they are themselves their own influencers. An SME is half the time its own influencer because it broadcasts its own content on LinkedIn. It broadcasts it on all the platforms. It is in charge of its own content. And if you look deep into that SME, who's running it, they might have 20,000 followers. Who's running it? 1 or 2 people, the founder included. That's really where we need to be focusing, and we need to do more of that. We need to embrace more of that. And of course, that is going to bring a lot of change in the way we perceive media.
I have to ask this follow-up. So how does this change happen then? Because, or whose task would it be to put, I'll use your words, guardrails, to put the guardrails to ensure that the influencers and micro content creators are businesses, but also support them to transition into agencies like maybe Lerato agency run by Pat?
Yeah, I mean, of course, now you're getting into a different topic with me, because I think that everybody's waiting for support. And I think we need to start talking in South Africa from a point of view of nobody's coming to help you, right? Because that's what true entrepreneurship is. I mean, if you look at all the government agencies that are set up to help you, they're sitting there with a budget of 250 million, but there's 63% of us that don't work. Out of 45, you do the mathematics. So I think they have damaged our psyche because they told us that help is coming. And once we kind of just awaken from that dream and realize that there's no organization that is established to help you, you need to help yourself. If you then also look at, it's not just a South African story, it's actually a global story. There is no government in the world that has built an economy. There is no government in the world that has built an economy. The government's job is to allow the entrepreneurs to do what they must do, is to make sure that the influences are not unduly burdened. So you don't need to motivate the influencers. Just don't make sure you don't demotivate them. And that applies across. So I think when you're talking about this topic, because the pain of Africa is that we consume a lot, we buy a lot of product, but how much of those products do we actually own? And why do we wait for the champagne to come from France? You understand? When and that's just a cheap example. But I think it's us just taking ownership and waking up and just knowing that you're on your own.
No, I'm very fascinated by what you just said right now in terms of from a government perspective, and by no means I'm a politician or anything of that sort, but government does play a big role in terms of driving entrepreneurship and innovation in any country. If you think about it, the biggest infrastructure projects that we need to thrive as an economy, most of them are undertaken by the government. If you look at even in America, NASA, for example, for Elon Musk to be able to do what he did, he needed that base that was built by the government. So we can't really write off the role of the government in terms of just allowing people to do that which they need to do and be productive and contribute to the economy. And I mean, we also spoke about, the youth, which is something that obviously, for some of you that do not know, I also run a platform called the YOBAS, the Top 16 Youth on Brands Awards, which celebrates and recognizes these brands that are owned and run by young people. And what we are seeing is that, every year the platform keeps on getting better, not only by just the sheer size of the number of entries that we receive, but in terms of the types of businesses that young Africans are sort of engaging in. One of our winners this year runs a spectacle company, and she's got a factory in Italy, and is a young Black sort of woman. And I think the narrative needs to change, around young people, in a sense that, yes, no one is coming, and young people get it. That's why they do these things on their own, that no one is coming to save us. That's why they're building their own brands, they're building their own businesses, that can contribute, to this economy. Which also, by the way, now bringing it closer to obviously the topic of discussion from a media perspective, and even a challenge for media agencies or even media owners, because oftentimes when we want to get work, we always look at the top guys, but there's a lot of many, thriving mid-sized businesses that, media companies can benefit from, be it from an advertising perspective. I mean, just I think 3 weeks ago, there's a brand called Galaxy Boy that advertised on one of the Premier League. I don't watch soccer, so I'm very ignorant on any sports on that part, but which is a big global, there's a big thing, because here's a brand started by a young boy in Mamelodi advertising on the Premier League.